Well, good evening. This is the September 21, 2022 call for the League of Women Voters of Florida Clean Energy Committee. And we are here to hear our speaker tonight. Her name is Fischer. She is with the Electrification Coalition, and she is going to share with us her views on the challenges and opportunities we are facing right now with electrifying our fleets here in the United States, particularly government fleets. All right, Sarah, it is yours.
Yeah, I will go ahead and share my screen. I've got some slides going. Make sure this is full screen. You all see this okay? Yeah. Perfect. Yes. So thanks everyone for having me on. I know you heard from a couple of folks last week from the electrification, last time, not last week. Time is flying by. But I'll give a little bit of background of the Electrification Coalition for those of you who were on that call. And then the project that I'm going to be talking about the most today is called the Climate Mayor's Electric Vehicle Purchasing Collaborative. It is the project that we work on specifically to help electrify public fleets. So as Mary mentioned, I am a program manager at the Electrification Coalition. I've been with the EC full-time for a little over 2 years. Prior to that, I worked in city government, environmental nonprofits, kind of all across the board, but still in the energy and electric vehicle space, originally from Ohio, and I am currently now based in Seattle, Washington. So the Electrification Coalition, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we focus really just on driving policies and programs that will electrify all modes of transportation in the United States. Our mission in this regard is really focused on protecting economic and national security, as well as public health and American jobs. So it makes us a little bit different than a lot of organizations in the space. We were spun off of this other organization that you can see their logo on the screen called Sept, and they are really all about decreasing our dependence on foreign oil. And so we kind of look at electric vehicles as one of the ways we can decrease our dependence on foreign oil, because they're an entirely domestic produced form of energy that is much more stable in price and supply than gas and oil and all of those other kind of fuel sources are. So that's the background of our organization. We are technically based in DC, but all of our staff have actually been remote since prior to the pandemic. We've been around since 2010 about. We started originally creating a national roadmap, and now we have staff kind of based all around the country. So we do have one person, Torin, who was on the call last time, who's based in Orlando, but for the most part, we're really spread out because we like to have folks who work and live in all areas of the country and really have regional context for the things that we're working on. These are just some examples of some of the projects that we've worked on in the past. So the project, again, that I'll talk about the most is the Climate Mayor's EV Purchasing Collaborative. We also have a policy team who works on state policy accelerators, federal policy advocacy, and things like that. We were an electrification advisor for the Bloomberg Foundation's American Cities Climate Challenge, which was a 2 or 3 year program that just wrapped up this year, which really provided deep technical assistance to a lot of cities in a lot of different climate areas. We were also the lead electrification partner for the DOE's Smart Cities Challenge. We started out our experience doing more consumer adoption campaigns like Drive Electric Northern Colorado. And we have a couple of people right now that are also working on things like freight and goods delivery pilots. So we kind of touch all different areas of electrification and really work across the board in that space. So the Climate Mayor's EV Purchasing Collaborative is a project that we launched in 2018. It's a partnership between our organization, a separate nonprofit called Climate Mayors, and a procurement agency called Sourcewell. And it was really designed to help accelerate the electrification of public fleets across the country. So we provide free technical support, any kind of fleet analysis and other things that the cities could need to help them reduce costs and barriers to electrify fleets to make it easier for them to go electric. So a lot of the things that we do are things that we've learned can help public fleets based on what they've told us are their pain points. So increasing procurement choice is a big thing, including different leasing options, because a lot of the states or fleets and cities that we work with, they don't necessarily have access to the vehicles that the ZEV states like California might have access to, or even just locally, their dealerships might not stock them. By providing the technical assistance that we do, we're trying to reduce the administrative time that city staff might have to spend on this because they're not experts in electric vehicles. And so we can come in and provide this kind of technical assistance for free, take some of the work off their plate, since a lot of times sustainability staff are pretty overburdened with different projects in the first place. And then we use the hundreds of fleets that we have as part of the collaborative to really aggregate that demand, and that can lower costs when they're all signing on to the same procurement contracts. And then we help those fleets with pre and post development planning and training, and also offer cooperative procurement and bundling for things like EV charging stations and other equipment that they might need to support the adoption of the electric vehicles that they're looking at. I do always like to point out the project is called the Climate Mayors EV Purchasing Collaborative, but it's not just cities that are part of Climate Mayors. We have universities, counties, all kinds of different public fleets that are part of the collaborative now. That's just what it was named because Climate Mayors was one of the original partners that really launched the project. So some of the things that we do to help support fleets include the analysis of current vehicles in the fleet and recommendations for what they could be transitioned to if there are electric options available. We provide best practices and case studies for the different questions that fleets come to us with. Oftentimes we'll get really specific questions like, I'm a fleet that operates in Illinois and we have really cold winters, so how is that going to affect my battery life? And we actually have a case study about the city of Des Moines, Iowa, and how they have adopted vehicles that are electric in their fleet and the successes and the challenges that they've seen. We also really like to make peer-to-peer connections between fleets so that they can talk to someone that's in their role and not just, a community advocate or someone who works for a nonprofit that specifically advocates for EVs. They can talk to someone who's doing their job day to day, who already does it in an electric vehicle and can tell them what the experience is like. And then we try to really make sure that all of the fleets across the country have the same access to vehicles so that fleets in California aren't able to get vehicles so much easier than fleets in other parts of the state. And then in general, it's just a massive cohort of different public agencies that anytime a fleet has a question, we're able to connect them to someone who's already gone through that challenge or provide them an example of someone who's already passed that type of policy and can kind of give them best practices and solutions for what they're working on, which in our experience has been one of the biggest solutions, because most of the time when sustainability staff are going to their city council or their mayor and asking for permission to do a specific project, their leadership is going to ask them for examples of how it's gone somewhere else. And so having this cohort of 400 different fleets that have already gone through this process or are starting to go through this process is really valuable in that aspect. I'm sure all of you know, but these are kind of the different reasons why we like to talk about going electric. Cost savings, obviously EVs have a much higher efficiency and a lower total cost of ownership. And this is a big reason why we talk to fleets right now is the fleet analysis that I'll talk about later really shows the total cost of ownership difference over vehicles' lifetimes and can show them that even if an EV costs, a couple thousand more upfront at the time of purchase, it's going to save money over its lifetime. And so it's worth it to invest in that vehicle now. The environmental benefits, EVs can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 50%, even if they are charged on fully non-renewable electric sources. So when a city is also working on solar, the environmental benefits are even greater. We specifically like working with public fleets because it improves the air quality in cities where these massive public fleets are driving around trying to accomplish things day by day. And so it really makes an impact to have low or zero tailpipe emissions where these city vehicles are driving around. Fortunately, we have seen even more expanding offerings with EVs, so it makes sense to drive electric now as we're starting to see more things like buses and pickup trucks and things like that come out that can actually accomplish the use needs of what different cities and different fleets are trying to accomplish. In the early days of EVs, we really had only a handful of options, and a lot of them were smaller sedans. And now we're starting to see more options that are making it easier to make this transition. And then reducing our dependence on foreign oil, obviously, is something that I talked about earlier, but transportation right now accounts for 70% of our crude oil and petroleum imports, and 92% of all of our transportation in the United States is powered by oil. So electricity is one of those ways that we can provide a valuable source of fuel diversity and really make sure that our country and our cities and their operations aren't dependent on foreign powers and things that are going on globally. We can continue to get things done and operate on a normal basis, regardless of the global economic and political conditions of the day. Going a little bit deeper into cutting costs and emissions, this is just a chart that we typically like to show cities because it really shows the difference in all electric versus plug-in hybrid versus gasoline only. And this is based on a tool that is free to use from the Department of Energy. But you can see that the cost to fuel an all electric vehicle is less than half the cost of an entirely gasoline vehicle. And the annual emissions are almost a third of the emissions of the gasoline vehicle. And there's in the slide notes, there's a link to this tool that it can be really valuable for showing the difference between one-off kind of vehicle comparisons like this, but I'll also talk a little bit about our tool that we use with fleets to show them a whole fleet analysis of transitioning to electric. So in general, on our website, there are a number of tools that we talk to cities about. The website for the EV Purchasing Collaborative is called driveevfleets.org. And I will make sure to send out these slides afterwards so that everyone has this information. But we have a tool on there where you can browse the available light duty vehicles, school buses, street sweepers, and more that Sourcewell currently has on contract. Right now is a little bit of an interesting scenario because the supply chain crisis is very real. And I just had a conversation with a fleet today where they would love to buy EVs, but they actually can't find them anywhere. And so that's something that I would definitely, as you're going out to your cities and talking to them about converting to electric, it's a big challenge right now because vehicles are actually just not getting produced. And even if a city puts in an order for an EV today, if they can find someone who will accept an order, lead times can be up to 12 to 14 months. And so we're in a kind of an interesting scenario right now where supply chain delays have made the transition to electric difficult right now. There are a lot of cities that are really trying to work hard on it. And we're really focusing on making sure that they have the tools and resources that they need to make that transition when the supply chain does recover. So happy to share more resources about that if folks have questions on why the supply chain is the way it is and when we think it'll recover. But that's something that when we do have more vehicles in stock, those would be available on the Drive EV Fleets website to compare. There are also resources like EV procurement and policy documents, frequently asked questions about electric vehicles and case studies, things like that, that can be really helpful for a city as they're planning this transition. These are just some examples of some of the the way that vehicles might look when they are up on their website. These prices and years are not accurate right now. I think most of the vehicles will probably say coming soon at this point, but typically you would be able to see all of the vehicles like this. And then these are the charging vendors that are currently on Sourcewell contracts right now for that aggregate demand bulk purchasing kind of agreement. We also have a bunch of school buses. There are a number of school bus vendors that have all electric options. So those are really great if any of your cities are really closely linked with local school districts or work with them. And there are some more medium and heavy duty electric chassis and equipment available, like box trucks, street sweepers, refuse trucks, things like that. I will say right now, most medium and heavy duty equipment is not cost parity with gas equipment. So when we're seeing cities purchase these larger medium and heavy duty equipment, it's because they were able to get grants to afford them. And that's something that even when we do our total cost of ownership analysis in the tool that I'll talk about, it just doesn't come out that they have a good total cost of ownership comparison over their lifetime because the upfront purchase price is so expensive. But all of the market data that we've seen is showing that with battery prices expected to decrease significantly within the next 5 to 10 years, during that time frame, these will reach cost parity with gas options. And so it will make it a lot easier for cities of all sizes to purchase them. Part of our work with fleets also kind of centers around, talking about fleet planning in different aspects. So one of the things we talk about a lot with them is the benefit of right sizing vehicles. So it's not just about, we need to transition all vehicles to electric. It's taking a look at, do you even need all of the vehicles in your fleet? If you have a vehicle that only travels 2,000 miles a year and one that only travels 1,000 miles a year, maybe you could eliminate one of those vehicles and then you just have one asset that travels 3,000 miles a year. That can have a lot of benefits because you're reducing your capital budget, your maintenance budget, and your operational budget, and can help an organization move to alternative fuels with those savings. So that's something that we'll talk about with our fleets if they need additional assistance talking about fleet planning in general. And then this is the tool. Oh, sorry, let me go back. This is the tool that I have mentioned a couple of times. It's a free resource on our website. It's called the Dashboard for Rapid Vehicle Electrification. It's a tool that is based in Excel, and we can upload the entire city fleet with their VINs and then their annual vehicle miles traveled and their replacement timelines into the tool. And it compares every current vehicle to a potential gasoline replacement option and a potential electric replacement option. And by doing that, we're able to compare what is the total cost of ownership over those two potential replacements lifetime, and would the electric option save money? In most cases, for the light duty vehicles right now, it absolutely saves money if you go with an electric option. But we do see, this chart is a little blurry, but if you look over here and more like the delivery truck and the freight truck categories, the cost of the EV vehicle is so high that the total cost over its lifetime still gets outweighed by the gas vehicle. So it definitely depends on the type of vehicle and how the vehicle is used, but this can help us help fleets identify which vehicles in their fleet are good to transition right now to electric, and which ones should we plan for transition 5 or 10 years down the line as they come up for replacement. So just a quick summary about the collaborative. We currently have more than 400 committed cities, counties, ports, universities, transit agencies, and other public fleets. That all of those fleets combined, there are almost 6,000 light duty EVs and buses committed to being transitioned to electric. Almost 4,000 of those have already been procured or ordered. And almost 1,600 fleet charging stations have also been installed to support those vehicles to date. if you are looking for examples of fleets that have done this work so far, the case studies on our website are really, really great resources. We actually have one from Winter Park, Florida. They were one of our really early partners. They replaced 5 vehicles in their fleet with Nissan Leafs, and they chose to lease them, which ended up saving the city about $1,200 per vehicle. There's a couple of other examples in here. A lot of them will talk about reducing their fleet costs, how much money they save in operational and emissions, and different things like that. So definitely take a look at that. Those are on our website on the driveevfleets.org under resources or case studies. Typically, when I'm giving this presentation, it would be directly to cities. And so when we talk to them, we always say next steps would be, reaching out to us, talking about making a commitment, quote unquote, commitment to electrification. None of the cities in this project pay anything for the technical support that we provide. They just have to commit to transitioning their fleet to electric. And it could be something as small as, we want to buy 2 electric vehicles by the end of 2022. And that really just helps us go back to our funder and say, we have X number of fleets transitioning X number of vehicles. None of them ever sign anything. It's really usually just an email from a city, and that's when we consider them a quote unquote committed fleet, and we're able to provide the support that they need. And then they can talk to us about whatever questions they have, what help, maybe they want to start with a fleet analysis, maybe they have other specific questions. And then we also tell fleets if they're super far ahead of the curve in adopting EVs, they can also just talk to us about writing a case study that can be used to help educate other fleets. And I just wanted to share some upcoming webinars that also might be of interest to all of you. These are going to be run by some of my coworkers that are focused a little bit more on federal infrastructure funding. So the federal infrastructure funding, as I'm sure many of you have heard, is a really large pot of money coming out from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was passed earlier this year. And so they are operating a series of monthly webinars to keep folks up to date with things that are changing, where things stand with state plans getting approved, how to apply for the funds, et cetera. And so most of this funding would be for publicly accessible charging stations, not necessarily fleet charging stations, but it can be really valuable to keep up to date with this information. So I will make sure that these, the registration links for these are in the slides as well, if you are interested in joining any of those. And that is the end of my presentation. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And Mary, I'm not sure if you wanted to have time for questions or if there was different way you wanted to go about it.
Definitely want to have time for questions. We do have time. So yeah. What questions we have for Sarah tonight? Rusty, you're muted. You're muted. Asked to unmute. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
No? Yeah, okay. Yes, I've just, I assume you're going to do this, but I am on this call with Terry Driver, and we're on like a green committee here on Longboat Key. I passed this, the message, the link to this to a few of our local officials, but they didn't make it. We want to make sure that we get this message to them. So you'll be sharing your presentation, I assume, so that we can share this information with them?
Yep. I will share the slides with Mary afterwards, and I'll let you, Mary, get it out to everyone.
I think even better, Sarah, you're available to come into a meeting which would involve your team, your green team, and the city officials, correct? Is that correct, Sarah?
Yeah. So we still have calls with cities all the time directly. So typically, it would need to be the city reaching out to us, not a
Sure.
resident of the city. So if you have a city that's interested in meeting with us, happy to schedule a call. It might not be me personally, it might be someone else on my team, but we definitely have time to talk to them and talk about their questions, things that they need to make the transition to going electric. But either way, we'll definitely send the slides so everyone has them to look through and share if they'd like to.
And Sarah, just to follow up with Rusty, this is Terry. Hi. So yeah, our green team, we also have through the town of Longboat Key has their own green team, which is great. We have a direct contact with the town of Longboat Key. We could definitely send this information forward. So we're super excited about it. I had kind of a specific question. Maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe it's too much, but we have a lot of these, I'm gonna call them golf carts, but what do you call them, little motility carts or utility carts or whatever, that buzz around, and every single one in the city. In fact, I smelled one today that smelled like diesel, which was really upsetting to me. But I think they're all gas powered. And so that would be a great thing for this topic. So I guess, sorry, it's probably not a good global question, but just a thought. And we'll connect you and Sarah and Carolyn Brown for sure.
Yeah, no, we get that question a lot. Unfortunately, we mainly work with, traditional on-road vehicles. So I can tell fleets that there are electric options available, but the drive tool that we use, it will only operate with traditional on-road, highway rated vehicles, because it runs by reading the VINs that it can decode from the fleet. So there are definitely a ton of cities that are adopting those kind of smaller EVs. They're typically from a place like Polaris. They have GEMS carts, but there are a bunch of brands that they could look at if they're interested in doing that.
We have several hands raised. I'm just going to go across my screen here. Val, what's your question? Val, you're muted.
Sorry. Sarah, do you work with police departments? I see too many police vehicles parked with the motor running so that they can work on their computers. And I just wondered if you work with police departments also.
Yeah, we have worked with a couple of police departments. In our experience, most of the police departments right now, or at least over the past couple of years, they were going with things more like Ford hybrid interceptors rather than an all electric vehicle, because of the exact issue that you're talking about, where they when they're parked for a long period of time, they wouldn't necessarily have to idle because it would be running off the hybrid battery. The one challenge that we have heard from a lot of police in transitioning to electric is, one, there up until the last year weren't any pursuit rated EVs, and so they weren't able to justify buying an EV if it wasn't gonna be able to help them accomplish their job. And two, there weren't any EVs that had a safe area for them to store protective equipment like a gun safe. And so we're starting to see that change. So we've had a number of police fleets actually adopt Teslas. So there are a couple of fleets out there that have gone with Teslas, and there are a bunch of articles out there if you're interested in reading more about that. One of the challenges with Teslas is there's kind of an optics issue. The Ford Mach-E actually got pursuit rating in the past year, and so we're starting to see some fleets look at that. But again, it kind of just comes down to, can the vehicle meet the needs of its use and things like that. But the hybrid interceptors, if your police fleet isn't willing to look at all electric vehicles yet, are a really good kind of midway solution.
Okay, thank you.
And Steve Urs from Tallahassee.
Yes, Sarah, well, in Tallahassee and Leon County, both the city and the county are having some of these supply chain issues. The city with the Ford Lightning, and then the county's got some delays. But I know Sarah's talked to Sindel Brunel in the Leon County Sustainability Office, and Sindel mentioned to me a couple of things that y'all might be interested in, and that is Leon County did the drive analysis some months ago, but then they did it again more recently, and they found that it was a more helpful tool because the tool had changed and that there were more options. So they feel like doing this more recent analysis help them. Sindel also mentioned that a lot of local governments use the Florida Sheriff's contract to purchase electric vehicles because there are some different vehicles on there that are, she says, stronger, like a stronger bolt, and that in some cases the prices are better. So I wondered, Sarah, have you been able to compare the two, the Florida Sheriff's contract with what you're able to provide?
No, we're completely brand and procurement source neutral. So if someone finds an EV somewhere else, that's fantastic. We don't ever require that folks in the collaborative use the collaborative contracts. It's more kind of there as an option for fleets that are in states that don't have those statewide procurement contracts. And I think Winter Park, the fleet that we had worked with on that case study, I think they actually did get a few of their vehicles off of the sheriff's contract. So it varies state by state. I think especially right now with the supply chain delays, it's going to vary even more. The contracts that Sourcewell has, they order directly from the manufacturer. And so we find out as soon as the order bank opens, and we try and send a blast out to our fleets and tell them, you know, Ford tells us that the order banks for the Mach-E are going to be open for a week. But lately they've been getting so bombarded with orders that they say the order banks are going to be open for a week and they're actually only open for a day because that's as many as they can take. So it's been a very interesting situation, and you know, the price issue is also interesting right now. A lot of manufacturers, even if you are placing an order, you're placing a price blind order, which means you're just saying, I want a vehicle in 2023 and I don't know what it's going to cost me, but I want it. So that's been an interesting development for a lot of our fleets and individual consumers as well.
It's certainly a seller's market here. Rhonda.
Yeah, hi. I don't have a really well-formulated question. Yesterday, I was reading about grid congestion and some grid vulnerabilities with the major electric markets. And I can't remember what I was reading it in, but they had a Department of Energy graphic that showed generation, transmission, and then the end use, you know, large and small users. But the paradigm still doesn't include storage or users contribution back. And I was wondering if that's part of the, say, municipal or small business selling point when it comes to purchasing vehicles, the vehicle to grid capacity, the storage involved in that, or putting it somehow together with generation, truly distributed generation, such that so that the issues of grid vulnerability are, you know, because you heard about Texas telling people not to charge their cars when they had the heat wave, which is really ironic and almost funny. But I didn't know if that was part of a larger communication scheme for this purpose.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. So that is something that's being discussed more frequently, is the idea that electric vehicles are a resiliency strategy, if nothing else, in that, you know, we can power the grid or our homes if anything happens and the grid isn't available. And so it's becoming a larger point of discussion. I don't know that any of the cities that we work with currently have implemented a strategy like that yet, but as battery storage technology becomes more available and as vehicles become more available, I think that's something that we'll start to see more often. We've started to see more grant opportunities coming out at the federal level for exploration pilots in that area. But no one that I have worked with directly has necessarily done that yet. So the answer is yes, it is a topic of conversation, but no, it's not a widespread practice yet. It's definitely something that we like to mention when folks are asking us about grid reliability and stability. You know, there are a lot of issues with the grid right now, but those issues exist outside of EVs. We need to fix the grid regardless. And right now EVs make up less than 1% of the energy that's being used on the grid. So EVs as a challenge for the grid is less of a concern, and we're actually seeing that they could be more of a solution than anything.
Thanks. What I'm really hoping to see is that before we start turning people off, or the power brokers start turning people off from purchasing EVs, that we'll implement some kind of grid stabilization through distributed generation that we currently aren't using. You know, just it's a messaging thing. Thank you, though. Thank you.
Great. Betsy Riley.
Hi, Betsy Riley. I'm Sustainability Manager for Alachua County. We're a northern Florida county, which includes the University of Florida. We are moving towards electric, and then we got stalled towards electric. So we've got 6 electric vehicles, 6 hybrids. And there were just 2 points I wanted. One is just to put on your radar. We found an unexpected barrier is reluctance on the part of people to use the vehicles. So our fleet manager has said that if a electric vehicle is an option and a gas powered vehicle is right next to it and somebody's running an errand, they will take the gas. Just because there's just a comfort piece for them. So we're finding we're going to have to put together some sort of training or education campaign to sort of move people through that. So I wanted to let people know that that was a barrier we encountered. The next barrier we've run into is just infrastructure. We want to make, before we commit to any vehicles, we want to make sure we can take care of them. So we have to make sure we have somebody in place that can do the maintenance on the vehicles. And our fleet manager mentioned another of his big concerns was making sure the vehicles were available to use during an emergency. So if our grid is down, we still have to be able to run our vehicles. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on addressing that, or maybe that's a bigger question as well.
Yeah, I mean, lots of questions, definitely willing to have another conversation, but I'll answer them kind of broadly now. The question on staff reluctance is very common, especially, you know, I came from Ohio, which is a very red state. It's not the same as working in some of the, you know, the Californias and the Washingtons of the world. So we had a lot of, you know, discussions around fleet pushback and things like that. So that's something that we are always happy to help create resources or provide links to things that would be helpful if you're drafting your own resources. And we always recommend doing a sort of fleet education day when you're getting EVs in your fleet, because it really helps them understand and test drive the vehicles and see that there is no difference. It's just driving a car with a different fuel source. And so that's a really big and easy way to combat that kind of reluctance. One of the other things that we've kind of heard is that one of the best solutions is just top down saying you have to. It's kind of, you know, the carrot versus the stick way of going about it. But if there is a really good top down leadership that says that this is what we're doing, that can be really effective. We have seen a lot of fleets, or at least sustainability departments working with fleets, pass green fleet procurement policies. So that's more on the procurement side, which is really just saying, if we have to replace a vehicle at some point, we have to look at electric options before anything else. And if for some reason electric option doesn't fit, we have to look at a hybrid option. And if for some reason a hybrid option doesn't fit, and having that really written into policy so that fleets or departments or whoever is in charge of buying vehicles isn't allowed to buy a gas vehicle without at least seeing if an electric option fits, then it really combats a lot of that kind of, well, it would be easier if we just got a gas option. The infrastructure side, definitely a challenge in terms of charging infrastructure. That's something that I think we like to combat with the fleet analysis, because if we look at your fleet data and we can see that you know, based on the current odometer reading, it only drives maybe 50 miles a week. If it's driving 50 miles a week and that vehicle has a 250-mile range, in theory, you might only need to charge that vehicle fully once a week. And so you might be able to get away with powering 50 vehicles off of one level 2 charger. And you don't really need to be concerned about installing a 1-to-1 ratio of charging stations. On the maintenance side, that's a bigger question that we get into with, you know, how long are you keeping the vehicles in your fleet? If it's 8 to 10 years, you don't need to do any kind of training that's different for your technicians, because the only maintenance that really needs to happen on an electric vehicle is the windshield wipers, the tires, maybe the brake pads eventually. But anything with the high voltage battery systems, like the battery itself, should not be touched by someone who is not a dealer certified technician, because you're going to void the 8 to 10 year warranty that you have on that vehicle. And it's free for them to do that service. So you wouldn't want to touch it anyways. So if you're buying an electric vehicle today, you've got 8 to 10 years to figure out what would we do if we had to do any kind of high voltage battery maintenance. And we are starting to see some community colleges and other local programs be stood up to kind of address those challenges. But in all of the fleets that I've worked with, none of them have ever had a challenge where they couldn't do the maintenance themselves on the vehicle, because it wasn't something that was new to them. It was traditional vehicle maintenance. And often they actually saved money on maintenance because they don't have to do things like oil changes, and there's fewer moving parts that can break and things like that. So those are the kind of conversations we're happy to have with fleets directly. I think the best thing to do is to really just get them in the vehicles and force them to drive them around for a while and realize, you know, they're the same, if not better than gas cars, but also setting up those kind of peer sharing calls where they can talk to counties or cities or other fleets that have already had those vehicles in their fleets. That really helps convince a lot of people who have that kind of hesitancy, because they're talking to someone who does their job day in and day out and hearing what their opinion is on the vehicle. I think I answered all of your questions, but definitely feel free to reach out to me, Betsy. I would love to have a conversation and talk about if there's anything else that we could send over that would be helpful.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I hope it's a short one, Maxine.
Yes, thank you. You, Sarah, are available to come to meet with city officials. Would that include county officials too? And what if a fleet manager wanted to meet with you, or do you only go from the top down?
Nope, we meet with everyone. Actually, I think it's often sometimes more valuable to meet directly with fleet managers, because they are the ones who have the authority on the vehicles. But having everyone in the room who kind of has a say in green fleet policies, sustainability is really helpful. And I will say we don't typically travel for those meetings, so it wouldn't necessarily be in person, but we can go to virtual meetings like this.
Yeah, virtual is fine. And the peer sharing calls, is that something that you would initiate by request, or the cities or counties would do that with information from you about who the peers would be?
The cities or counties, they would, you know, tell us, here's the thing that we're struggling with, and if it's not something that we can help, then we would look at, you know, maybe we should set up a county with this other person that we know. So that would be based more on a conversation that we have with them.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at the top of the hour, I would say. And so thank you so very much, Sarah, for spending this hour with us and deepening our knowledge on this topic. Very, very helpful. And Sarah, as said many times, please invite her in to have those conversations with your public officials. That's going to help move the needle. She's got such deep expertise, as does her team. So next month, we will have two people from the Florida Conservation Voters Organization to tell us about their journey to bring in more of an environmental justice component to the work they're doing. So we're going to be looking forward to hearing what their journey has been like, and maybe imagine more of that for ourselves. So I'm going to wrap up this meeting and say thank you all. Thank you all for the work you're doing in your communities. We're helping outside the gate, so to speak, in many ways. We should not underestimate what we can accomplish. Many times if you have a conversation with somebody who's in the organization, they say it's ever so helpful to have you outside making the points that we do about it's time to change and do better for the environment. So thank you tonight, and we will be distributing the slides that Sarah showed tonight, and we have a recording for tonight also. So good night and goodwill, and see you next month, I hope.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.